Good morning, this is Kevin Pogoda. I have the pleasure of serving as the current president for the Virginia Land Title Association. Thank you very much for logging in to our webinar. This is our annual meeting where we're going to tell you all the wonderful things that the VLTA has been doing for you. The presentation has been pre-recorded to make sure it goes off just right, and after the recorded presentation, I will give a live presentation on certain hot topics that are going to be affecting our industry in the very near future. And so with that, I see by my clock it's 10:01. Katie, if you would kindly start the presentation so that we can keep the trains running on time. And again, this has been pre-recorded. It's available on the VLTA website. So Katie, go ahead and cue the presentation, and let's have a look at what the VLTA has been doing over this last board cycle.
Hello, my name is Kevin Pogoda, and it is my distinct privilege to introduce to you the 2015 Annual Report for the Virginia Land Title Association. The duration of this report will be about 10 minutes, after which there will be an opportunity for questions and answers, followed by a presentation where I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent developments and some developments that you can expect to be coming your way in the next several months. If you have a question during the annual report and you are connected by the webinar, please chat your question through the chat box on your computer. If you are connected to this presentation just by the phone, please email your questions to Katie Herndon, and her email address is vlta@vlta.org, and she will retrieve your questions in real time, and we will address them at the end of this presentation. Our current board of directors is as follows. President, Kevin T. Pogoda. President-elect, Glenda Brooks. Vice President, Catherine Crawford. Secretary, Skip Sachs. Past President, Myrna Keplinger. Communications, Elizabeth Jamerson. Education, Frank Butler. Events, Megan Malone. Examiner, Julie Rutledge. Legislative Affairs, Norbert Frigga. Membership, Sonia Coopert. Now, let's hear a brief report from each of the committee chairs.
Hello, this is Sonia Coopert, and I chair the membership committee. As you can see from the bar graph, we have had an over 50% increase in membership, due largely in part to our debut of all-inclusive membership, giving members 100% free online education, 50% off licensing and certification courses, free attendance at up to 3 regional events each year, and up to 50% off of VLTA's annual convention. If you are not already an all-inclusive member, please consider upgrading your membership today.
Hello, this is Frank Butler, and I chair the Education Committee. The growth of our membership has been paralleled by our growth educational offerings. As you can see from the graph, we are projected to file approximately 5,400 CE credits on behalf of our members, which will be more than double what we accomplished last year. In this year alone, we are offering 28 CE credits at live events throughout Virginia, as well as 2 Title Examiner CCE events. And for those of you who could just not break away from the office, we have developed over 100 hours of online CE, most of which also qualifies for CLE as well. We are very proud to say that without a doubt, VLTA is the preeminent provider of education for the title and settlement industry.
Hello, this is Megan Malone, and I chair the Events Committee. The growth that you have seen in the previous slide is also reflected in our growing attendance for conventions. Since 2013, attendance for this main event has nearly tripled due in part to the increase in what we offer. At our last convention, We have supported members with a best practices manual workshop, an advocacy dinner, a multitude of product demonstrations, and continuing education for title agents, attorneys, and holders of the VCTE and VCTSA certifications.
Hello, this is Kevin Pogoda again, speaking on behalf of Norbert Priga, who chairs the Legislative Affairs Committee. We have had a very exciting year so far, reviewing over 30 bills affecting the title and settlement agent industry, including a very important bill authored by the Virginia Bureau of Insurance, along with proposed amendments to the regulations that implement real estate settlement agents, also authored by the BOI. We are very proud of the good relationship we have fostered with the BOI over the last few years. On an almost monthly basis, members from the VLTA's Board of Directors meet with representatives from the BOI and have a robust discussion regarding the issues that affect you in what you do. Our own Myrna Keplinger, past president, heads up the task force that meets with the BOI. But the BOI task force is not our only liaison. We also have Leslie Kostelecki, who represents our association before the Virginia Insurance Continuing Education Board, and we have Liz Steele, who represents us before the Housing Commission. And we cannot forget to mention our distinguished lobbyist, James Pickrell, who has provided invaluable assistance navigating through all the bills that are proposed by our Virginia legislators each year.
Hello, this is Elizabeth Jamerson, Chair of the Communications Committee. Our social media footprint grows larger and larger. Check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter for valuable updates on matters affecting the title and settlement agent industry. Also, stay tuned for the release of our brand new Career Center to be launched in June.
Hello, this is Julie Rutledge, the Director-Editor of the Examiner Magazine Committee. I want to thank all of you who have contributed your time and talents over the years and helped to make the Examiner such a success. I also want to thank all of our many advertisers for their support. They have enabled the Examiner to stay in publication. Each year we publish over 30 in-depth stories on title topics that are of interest to our members. This is done with the help of over 50 contributors. We have 8 committee members, and we have a readership base of over 5,000 land title professionals. We are very proud of the work that we do. If you have any ideas for the Examiner, please let me know.
Hello, this is Glenda Brooks, Acting Treasurer. I get to talk about the money. As you can see from the chart on the right, our year-end profit and loss was certainly booming from 2002 to 2006 when the market was booming. But when the market went south, beginning in 2007, so did our revenue. Thankfully, however, you can see in recent years we are back in the black, and we intend to keep it that way with your help. Thank you. This is Catherine Crawford, Vice President of the VLTA. After you have voted, consider taking advantage of your membership. Update your member profile, register for live events, or sign up for a class online. The VLTA is here for you. As you can see from the previous slides, we have had a very productive year, and it is now time for us as a board to pass the torch to the next board. As this is where you come in, please vote at the end of this presentation for the next board. For your consideration, I present to you the new slate of officers and directors. President, Glenda Brooks. President-elect, Catherine Crawford. Vice President, Norbert Priga. Treasurer, Sonia Cooper. Secretary, Skip Sachs. Past President, Kevin Pogoda. Communications Director, Colleen Taylor. Education Director, Aida Barnett. Events Director, Megan Malone. Examiner Director, Julie Rutledge. Legislative Director, Tony Brown. Membership Director, Emily Bardal. At-large position, Mary Long. Additional at-large member, Lisa Owen. Again, please vote at the end of this presentation.
This is Skip Sachs, VLTA Secretary, reminding you that we could not do all of this alone. We're supported by a robust group of sponsors and strategic partners that can help you do what you do best. Here is just a small sampling of our supporters. In our President's Circle, I would like to thank Rhino Live and SoftPro. Our platinum sponsor is Old Republic National Title Insurance Company. Gold sponsors include First Virginia Community Bank, Title Industry Assurance Company, and finally, our silver sponsors include Access National Bank, Fast Tracks, First American Title Insurance Company, and Virginia Interactive.
In closing, this is Kevin Pogoda again. Thanks again for all you do, and we look forward to partnering with you for another wonderful year in the Virginia Land Title Association. Don't forget to vote. Use the instructions on the next screen to vote right now. While the voting occurs, we will now address any questions that you may have for about a minute or two as all the votes get in before we advance to the next component of our program, where I'll be talking a little bit about things that are coming up in the next several months. Remember that if you are connected by the webinar, you can chat your questions using the chat box. If you are connected only on the audio, you'll have to email your questions to Katie. Her email address is VLTA@VLTA.org.
This is Kathleen Herndon, Executive Director of the Virginia Land Title Association. On your screen, you will see instructions for casting your vote on the 2016-2017 Officers and Directors slate. Please cast your vote by May 30th at 5 o'clock p.m. You can follow the link listed on your screen, or where it says click here, if you are able, click there, and it will take you to the voting screen. If you are unable to use these instructions for voting will be emailed to you following today's annual meeting. If you have any questions about your login information, please feel free to email me at VLTA@VLTA.org. Thank you.
All right, that concludes the recorded presentation of the annual meeting. And to supplement the instructions that were provided to you, if you go to the VLTA webpage, right there on the login landing page, there is a link there that you can vote. So while we transition from the recorded presentation to the live presentation where I've got some talking points, I'm going to ask Katie to queue up those talking points for me. But while that's happening, please, right now, take a few minutes to vote. As you may have seen in our presentation, one of the most wonderful developments is that we have about a 50% increase in membership. Well, that's wonderful, but what that means is that we need even more people to constitute a quorum so that we have the requisite number of votes so that we have a board next year. So please don't forget to vote. That is very, very, very important. And so as you're doing that, again, Katie is going to be switching us over to the talking points that I have. I don't see any questions on the presentation. I didn't expect any. It was very thorough. For those of you that may have been joining us late, we have that presentation recorded, and it will be available for you if you wanted to look at that. And so now you should be seeing on your screen, not having seen any questions of the annual report, I'm just going to go into the updates and talking points, and there hopefully you see the overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Designated Licensed Producer Statute. I'm going to give you an update on the RESA Regulations. I'm going to talk a little bit about not a new topic, but an increasingly important topic, flat recording fees. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a question, a conversation that we are having at the Bureau. And that question and conversation centers around who should sit at the settlement table. So if, Katie, you could advance to the next slide. Let's begin by talking about the Designated Licensed Producer statute. Now this designated licensed producer statute, that stems from Virginia Code 38.2-1820. And Katie, I need you to advance to the next slide. There we go. There's obviously a delay for my readiness versus our wonderful technology that we're using. But you should see some of my talking points there. The first one, it has always been the case in this statute, for those of you that this is a new thing, that the designated licensed producer is responsible for a title company's compliance with all the insurance laws, rules, and regulations of this Commonwealth. Now, you might be the boss of a title agency, and you might be ruling the roost, and necessarily so, but statutorily, whoever you have designated as your individually licensed person, that person is, by statute, responsible for a title company's compliance with all the insurance laws, rules, and regulations. Now, before House Bill 393, there was no limitation on who could fill that role. It might be you as an owner, it might be an employee, might be a third party. There was no definition. Now there is a definition. Pursuant to House Bill 393, which passed the legislature, this designated licensed producer must now be either an employee or an officer or a director of the licensed entity. In the first go-round of this bill, there was only the recitation of employee. So the first draft of this bill, the designated licensed producer had to be an employee. We saw that bill as we monitored all the bills that were affecting our industry, and we made some polite noise about that, because I'm sure that there's maybe not one of you on the call today where you are a mom and pop operation, and you might be the chief cook and bottle washer, and you are an owner, and you are the only one that holds that title license, and therefore you would be the designated licensed producer. Well, if the bill passed in its original form, then you would fall afoul of this statute because you're not an employee. And that was the reason why we made a little noise along with some other folks. And there you now see the result of our labor. Now, the final version that passed requires that that designated licensed producer be an employee, officer, or director. The thinking being that if you are the owner, then you can appoint yourself as the officer or director of your own entity and thereby qualify as the designated licensed producer. So why was this, what's the motive behind this change? I will tell you that the motive behind this change really is focused on a small segment of companies out there. And just think for a minute, going back in time, when a title company wants to become licensed in Virginia, what do? They have to fill out an application. Well, what does that application require? That application requires the entity to identify one person, one individual that has a title license. That is the designated licensed producer. And for some folks out there, the smaller companies or companies that want to work in their minds smarter, they don't want to spend money hiring employees. They'd rather incur costs on a piecemeal basis, and they employ somebody, a third party, to do commitment and final title policy production. And that's the individual who may have or who should have a title license, and it's that individual that then becomes their designated licensed producer. That's the scenario that this statute is most focused on, because when you think of, let's say, let's say I'm an individual and I do commitment production or final title policy production. That's all I do. And of course, I want to make money just like you, and so I get a lot of clients, a lot of title companies to utilize my services. Well, if they're all small companies and I am their only designated licensed producer, then in the Bureau's view, how can one individual, how can just little old me be responsible for those 30 title companies and their compliance with all the insurance laws, rules, and regulations of the Commonwealth? That's where this statute is aimed at. And so what is more, I think, commensurate with the Bureau's rationale is that that designated licensed producer needs to have more of a vested interest in that entity, more so than little old me, a third party or independent contractor. It needs to be an employee, officer, or director. So this statute really only affects title companies that only have that third party or independent contractor as a designated licensed producer. It would not affect you if you have an employee who's licensed. It would not affect you if you, as an owner, currently have a license. And just because this statute's going on, if you want to use a third party, there's no prohibition against using a third party to do commitment production, as long as someone in your agency, either as an owner or an employee, has a title license. And so if you don't currently have that, if this designated licensed producer is currently that requirement is currently being satisfied by an independent contractor, you got a couple of options. Option one, maybe it's time for you to jump into the deep pool and hire someone as an employee that has a title license, or get your existing employee licensed. And be careful, though, when you are thinking about this solution. And the reason I say that is that, I'll get to in a little bit, the recent amendation, the proposed changes to the rules pertaining to settlement agents, they have, as proposed, a definition of an employee. So if you're out there and your designated licensed producer is a third party and you think, oh, quick solution, I'll just throw a W-2 at them and change them from an independent contractor to an employee, I think you need to consult the definition of employee that is proposed in the changes to the RESA regulations. The Bureau is taking the position that the IRS takes as to what constitutes an employee. And in brief summary, names do not matter. Whether or not an individual receives a 1099 or W-2 does not matter. What matters is control. Control. If you control the method and manner of how a person works, they look more like an employee. If you do not control the method and manner of how that individual works, they look more like an independent contractor. That's a brief summary, but you need to be careful when you are hanging your hat on an employee holding the title license. Make sure that they are an employee in function as well as nominally. Now, if you've come to the conclusion that, well, I don't have anybody but a third party, and I want to take the test myself and get licensed, well, we have a solution for you. On our website, VLTA website, we have a pre-licensing course that is completely online, completely at your own pace, and you can take that course. I have the privilege of presenting that course, and you can laugh at all my jokes there. But for more information, visit the VLTA website. We would be happy to accommodate you and to help you understand what you need to do to become licensed in Virginia. Now, as I mentioned, this change to Virginia Code 38.2-1820, that has passed, and just like all the new bills have passed, the effective date will be July 1st, 2016. So if you need to get somebody licensed, you've got until then to do it. All right, so with that, Katie, if you could please advance to the next slide. And while Katie does that, I've got a little poll just to make the presentation a little interactive. Now that I have talked a little bit about designated licensed producer statute, I'd like you to take this poll just so that we can see what impact is going to be out there. Will the new designated licensed producer statute have an impact on your shop? So please select one, and once a requisite number of people have voted, then I will talk about the next talking point. So please vote. Wow, the votes are just pouring in here. Give it just a couple more seconds. We're up to 80%. Give me one more percent and we'll go. Oh, look at that. All right. I'm going to close the polls in 5 seconds. All right. I'm closing the polls. And just to share with you the results there, 59% of you said no, we're just fine. And 41% of you said this doesn't apply. So I guess nobody's going to be taking my class. Well, that's just great. I know that the folks that are on the call are a small sampling of the folks out there. So hopefully our class will provide a service for those that are affected. Let's move on to the next talking point, and that's to give you a status on these important regulations that implement RESA, Real Estate Settlement Agents. And so back in late last year, the Bureau proposed changes to these regulations that implement RESA, which is a big, big thing. I think the last time that they proposed regulations was back in 2003. So this is important. This is important to them, and it regulates for many of us what we do. And after that initial proposal, the public was given an opportunity to comment. We were able to lobby successfully to have the comments period deadline extended. So all the comments were in, and let's see, how many comments? I think there were, wow, at least 200 comments, I think, to this proposal. And what happens after the public comments is this. The BOI gets to comment on the comments. And they have done so. And those comments are not for our benefit, but what happens now is the State Corporation Commission at large is going to look at the regulations as originally proposed, look at all of the industry comments, look at what the BOI said in response to those comments, and then issue a final rule. And both the original order, or original proposal, all of the comments, and the BOI's comments, sorry, I misspoke. The BOI's comments are available for public inspection. And all of those are available on the action page of the VLTA website. So lots of documents there for you to read if this is new news to you. But where we stand right now, if you read the BOI's comments on the comments, you will discover that they have made minor adjustments from the original version. So if then the State Corporation Commission at large agrees with the BOI's comments to our comments, then what you could expect is this. Here are some of the highlights. You could expect a clarification as to the scope of these regulations. The BOI is trying to correct a misstatement in the original regulations that stated that these regulations only pertain to residential 1 to 4. They do not. They apply to real estate at large. It just depends upon who you are. If you're an attorney, these regulations, or the statute rather, only applies to residential 1 to 4. If you are a layperson settlement agent, they apply to both commercial and residential. You could also expect some new definitions that will be coming your way. And it is very important, as I mentioned in the prior talking point, for you to look at these definitions, but especially the one pertaining to employee, because that definition has an effect on who can qualify as your designated licensed producer. So expect some new definitions that will affect what you do, perhaps. There's also going to be language. You could expect that handling money includes wire transfer authority. If you will recall from the statutory definition of what constitutes a settlement agent, you will see in the second sentence of that definition that if you conduct closing and you handle money, you can be held to the standard of a settlement agent. Well, what is handling money? Well, handling money is not specifically defined. It certainly means, I think, exerting control over money, whether or not you physically touch it or touch the envelope that it's sitting in. But in the Bureau's view, at least in their comments, that's going to include merely having wire transfer authority. So this might have an effect on who needs to have that RESA registration requirement. Now I will say it here, and I will say it in addition in another talking point, that if you're an employee, and here's that definition coming up again, if you're an employee of a title company, and that title company has a RESA registration, that individual employee does not need to have their own RESA registration. There's been a lot of confusion of that, as we've seen in the comments, as well as our own questions to our own presentation. So keep an eye out for that. There you can also expect to see some clarification as to the requirement on underwriters. In the original proposal, I believe the Bureau was just trying to be economical with language, and yet as an unintended consequence, underwriters fell under certain requirements that statutorily do not apply to them, such as annual auditing requirements. That's statutorily not the case, and so the Bureau in their comments acknowledged that unintended consequence and will be adjusting the regulations appropriately. You may also see some requirements for closeout audits. Hopefully this will not happen to any of you, but if you ever decide to close up your shop, you've got a laundry list to go through that the Bureau is going to be expecting. And in our conversations with the Bureau, this addresses a fairly significant problem. People close up, bust out, belly up, and whatever, and then they disappear, leaving in their wake many uncashed checks, many unissued policies, and the Bureau is trying to be more vigilant with that procedure to the benefit of our industry and to the benefit of the consumer. So you're going to see, I believe, you should expect some closeout audit requirements. You may also see in the new regulations some yearly escheating requirements. Right now, the magic number statutorily is that if something is 5 years old in your account, it is presumed abandoned, and you can escheat it after 5 years. But there is an important exception to that rule in the statute, and that is that if you exercise due diligence and the payee is, quote, unlocatable, you can escheat earlier than the 5 year. You can escheat as early as a year. And so the Bureau would like to see more of a discipline of yearly escheating. So look for that. That, I think, would be a great exercise. Get those checks off of your books and out of your escrow account. You may also see some reporting requirements. Now, this might be a little daunting when you first read it, but just remember that the Bureau is responsible in part for monitoring the health and welfare of our industry. And so in order to aid them in that task, I think you're going to see in the final rule a lot of reporting requirements. So if you're in bankruptcy, or if you if your license is revoked in another jurisdiction, those kind of things that might bear upon your ability to function as a settlement agent here in Virginia, you might see then in the final regulations some new reporting requirements that you will have to abide by. You might also have some new operating requirements on how you are to reconcile monthly, to maintain documents, and the like. Those I don't think are going to be really anything new, that things that you're not probably already doing already, but now they're going to be in black and white. And you're also going to see, I believe you could expect, some settlement agent liability for the acts of independent contractors. I don't believe it's going to be strict liability, but I believe the Bureau's position is going to be that if you want to not have an employee, but to accomplish certain settlement functions through an independent contractor, that's fine. You just can't escape liability by doing that. And so keep a lookout for provisions in the new regulations regarding that. That's a very brief summary. Again, there's lots of information that you could find on our action page of our website on this topic. And when can we expect a final order? Well, I think any day now the final order can be issued. I suspect, this is just my own suspicion, that the State Corporation Commission would like to get this order issued in time so that they could have an implementation date of July 1st, along with all the other new bills that have passed. So if you want more information, again, visit the action page. You'll see the order there, industry comments, the DOI's comments, and when the final order comes out, we will certainly keep you in the know. Having said that, I'm going to open up another poll based upon some of the things that I have just mentioned. And this is a poll: how often does your company escheat? Do you do it annually? Do you do it more frequently than annually? Less frequently? Or it's not applicable? And while we take this poll, I'm going to ask Katie to queue up the next talking points. If you're asking questions, I see some questions coming through, but I'll answer all the questions at the end. So let's see, we got almost 80%. Let me just get another 5 or 10%. These results are going to be a little bit more mixed than the prior ones.
Kevin, I think we have a hand raised as well.
Right. All right. I'm going to close the poll. And so results being 11% of you escheat annually, 6% of you more frequently than annually, 20% less frequently than annually, and 63% of you not applicable. All right. Let me go on to the next topic. I will again handle questions at the end for the benefit of everybody who wants to stick around for the questions. Flat recording charges is my next talking point. And what is, for those of you that are not familiar with this topic, to put it, to oversimplify it even, that would mean basing a recording charge not on page count, but based on the document. And so if you've been in the business of being a settlement agent for any length of time, you have probably experienced a bounced back recording because your recording check was off. And why was it off? Oh darn, you know, that pesky lender, they increased their pages from on that deed of trust from the original recording to the final recording, and that increased my recording charge. I forgot to change the closing disclosure statement. Now, you know, my recording bounced back, and I only learned that it was rejected at 4 o'clock on Friday, and now I can't go to record until Monday, and the seller is screaming for her money. And, you know, again, if you've been in the settlement agent business for any length of time, this is probably a familiar situation or scenario to you. And yet, changing that dynamic and going to a flat recording system could address and solve that and a few other problems. And so, especially from ALTA and lenders and those that ascribe to the best practices, this flat recording charge idea is gaining a lot of momentum. And so the VLTA is trying to participate in this momentum and inform consumers and our membership regarding the pros and cons of this issue and to foster support. And certainly we want to hear from you. There will be soon a white paper that will be posted on our action page where we will try to keep you in the know as this issue develops. And what, in brief, could be some of the advantages? Well, as I had mentioned in my factual scenario, there could be less delays to disbursement. If we employ actuaries to select just the right number as to how much to pay for a document, we could create legislation conceivably that would increase the revenue. That would be wonderful in the clerk's eyes, and so this could certainly benefit the clerks. There could be rather, in such legislation, an encouragement to e-record. As an example, you could have a flat recording charge on a deed of trust of $30, and yet if you're e-recording, it could be 28, and thereby increasing the incentive to e-record, which again falls in line with best practices, falls in line with what many lenders are trying to employ. And in general, when you look at the advantages, there could be many stakeholders that could benefit. Clerks might get new revenue. Attorneys and lay settlement companies could have better service to their clients, faster disbursements. Everybody could get their money quicker without delays, especially if they are employing e-recording. Lenders could certainly throw their support in the sense of benefiting the consumer and having payoffs done quicker. And in the end, it could be a very consumer-friendly piece of legislation. So this is something that we're trying to raise awareness of, gain momentum doing, and participate. Please participate. The VLTA has a number of committees that you can participate in, and the legislative committee is one of them. We will be discussing this both in general on the website as well as in particular on that committee. So if you're not involved in the committee, now's the time to join. All right, I have another poll for you regarding this, just based on what I've mentioned in passing, which is a very cursory summary. If you had to make a decision now, would you support VLTA's efforts to effect a flat recording fee for documents across the Commonwealth? We're just trying to take your temperature and see, is there a lot of yes and amen out there, or no way Jose out there? So take a minute and let's see what you all have to say. Oh, you're all very quick to vote on this one, so maybe there's strong feelings on this one. Wow. Okay, 88% of you voted, so I'm going to close the poll now. So results are in. 5% of you are big old maybe. 8% of you, they're not applicable to you. 86% of you said yes. 0% of you said no. So I think we might have a good road to hoe in this field. So please keep posted on how you might be able to participate, voice your concern, or give us some ideas as to what good legislation might look like. Our final topic is who should sit at the settlement table, and again, at the end, I'll handle questions on anything that you want to talk about. I'll try to. This, as I had mentioned before, there in the recorded presentation, I have the pleasure of serving on the VLTA BOI task force, and really what that means is that I and past President Myrna Keplinger and board member Kathleen Crawford, as well as Lane Donovan, we all go over to the Bureau and we engage them in conversation at their request. And this is a wonderful development. We are very proud, as I mentioned in the recorded presentation, we are very proud of our relationship with the Bureau. They understand our industry and they want to be informed about our industry so that they can make good decisions that benefit us. That is not the case in other jurisdictions. If you are in the know and subscribe to other trade journals, you might become aware of other states that have very antagonistic relations with their regulators and regulators that don't understand our industry. The Bureau understands our industry, and so in one of these meetings, the Bureau proposed a question that they didn't want answered necessarily, but they thought it important to ask and to continue. And the question is, who should sit at the settlement table? Already, we have RESA as a statute, and so if you want to conduct settlements and handle money, then your entity must have a RESA registration. But beyond that, the question I think is being honed in as to whether or not that individual who is already covered by that RESA registration, does that individual need to also have a title license? This is the requirement in some other states, and so this is not a new thing. This is not currently the requirement in our state. I want to be careful in the way I say this. It is not required to have a title license to conduct a settlement. It is required to have a title license if you want to sell, solicit, or negotiate contracts of insurance. And so, yes, you can conduct a settlement without a title license, but you cannot sell, solicit, or negotiate contracts of insurance. And so, depending upon who you talk to, you know, if you're at the settlement statement, if you're at the settlement table and you're asked, you know, should I get basic coverage or should I get enhanced coverage? Does the answer to that question constitute selling, soliciting, or negotiating contracts of insurance? A lot of people would say yes. But without getting into those nuances, just to give you some black and white language, you might take a trip to the Bureau's website and see their archives of administrative letters. And in their comments to the comments, going back to my first point, or actually my second point, my second talking point dealing with the RESA regulations and the Bureau's comments, if you read the Bureau's comments, they make reference to one of their older administrative letters, and that's Administrative Letter 1997-5. And if you go to page 2 of that, I'm going to just read to you what they say. It's a question and it's an answer. The question is, if a title insurance agency or title insurance company registers as a settlement agent, do their employees have to register individually as well? The answer, no. The employees will come under the title insurance agencies or title insurance companies' settlement agent registration. So it has been long-standing position of the Bureau to have that position. And yet, I think because of what other states might be doing, I think the Bureau is interested in this idea of whether or not somebody who sits down at the settlement table ought to have a title license. So we're bringing that to your attention because if you want to participate in that discussion, now's the time to talk to one of the board members, talk to us at the VLTA convention, which is coming up in June, and voice your concern one way or the other so that when we go back and have this conversation with the Bureau, we are accurately reflecting your point of view. So with that, let me launch that final poll, and then I'll go into some questions. Here is my last poll. Who sits at the settlement table in your shop? Please select all that apply. So you can select more than one. Is it an attorney, title insurance licensed agent, or unlicensed employee of the title company, notary public, or other not applicable? And while this poll goes on, I'm going to take a look at some of these questions here. "64 so far have voted." Okay, one of my, well, let's see, I'll go into the questions right after this here. Okay, 78% have voted. If you can just get me up to 80%, I'll keep going here. I got just a few questions after this and one raised hand. All right, I'm going to close the poll. Mixed bag of results here. 12% of you said attorney, 55% said a licensed title insurance agent, 15% unlicensed employee of the title company, 15% notary public, and 39% other not applicable. All right, let's go on to some questions. Question number 1, does the VLTA offer a live presentation format for the pre-licensing course? The answer is no. if you feel like online is not your thing and you would rather benefit from a face-to-face encounter, you can learn from some of the best. Steve Shipman and Carol Butler have their own live course. Information about that course can also be found on the VLTA website. Let's see here. I see a raised hand. I'm going to see if I unclick. As I've clicked on the raised hand, Mary Long, I'm going to try to unmute you. Mary, if you're still on the phone, can you voice your question? All right. I think Mary got tired of raising her hand. I apologize, but Mary, if you can still hear me, you can email your questions to us, and we will try to answer them in due course. Okay, as my next question here, Chad, is as an agency with a producer license for years, how do we appoint a licensed producer and or find out who is listed as our licensed producer? Well, I'd say that you can simply engage the Bureau in that discussion. Your original application for a license for the agency would have designated who your designated licensed producer is. So if you don't have that application tucked away in your file, you could just call up the Bureau and find out from them directly who it is that is your designated licensed producer. I don't think you can go on the Bureau's website and discover if your agency has a license, if you have a license, who you're appointed with. But in terms of who the designated individual is, I don't know of any other way to find out that information other than contacting the Bureau directly. Next question, can one director serving on the board of managers for multiple settlements or title agencies be the designated licensed producer for those multiple agencies? Wow, okay, that's a good question. I guess let's look at, again, the statute. What does the statute require? It needs to be an employee, officer, or director of the business entity. And so if that director is indeed licensed, seems like you've satisfied the requirements of the statute. I don't see any other questions, but if you do have some and you want to talk to us directly, you can email Katie at VLTA@VLTA.org, and she can reroute your questions to me or to anyone else on the board. We would be happy to assist you. Please, as I mentioned earlier, please vote for the incoming slate of the Board of Directors. Please come to the convention. We are having a wonderful turnout already, and some of us, in keeping with the theme of convention, will be dressing up as movie stars. I myself am coming as Kevin Bacon. So if you want to see me dressed up as Kevin Bacon, come to convention and bask in the afterglow with the stars. If we could serve you in any other way, please give us a holler. Thank you so much for attending this presentation and for asking great questions. Bye-bye now.